This is NEGOTIATEx TV.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on the NEGOTIATEx Podcast. We are continuing our conversation with Tony Blauer, founder of the world's leading self-defense and combatives training and consulting company. If you haven't already checked out part A of this show, be sure to do that first. Now let's jump into the conversation with Tony.
I think we hear from a lot of folks that fear creeps into their negotiations and they get very fixated on a single action or two, and even how they're thinking about success kind of gets narrowed. How do you teach this self-awareness? I mean, how do I increase and prevent myself from getting like in the moment when I'm in my kind of fight or flight response mode? And I mean, how do I avoid from just zeroing in, taking the wrong action?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And you're going to hate my answer and love it at the same time. In 1980, when I was interviewed in Black Belt Magazine, I said to them, there should be as many self-defense systems as there are people practicing self-defense. And the editor was like, what? I said, yeah, you're an ectomorph. I'm a mesomorph. You had an amazing childhood. I was abused. My brother beat me up. You were a Golden Glove boxer. Everything influences how we relate to conflict and confrontation. To say that this style is going to solve this or that is erroneous, which is why it still is, like, even here 40 plus years later, I'm still coming up with new ideas and something happens in the news and we're working on it and going, okay, here's a new way to think about this. Violence is changing. Like, the palm strike hasn't changed, but how do we manage violence changes? I know what I could do, but I don't know what I would do if I have good self-awareness. So to come back to that question, I'll give you one more metaphoric example that's real. I've trained a lot of fighters. And I remember I've interviewed victims of violence. It's one of my things, because I can't experience everything. So, you were raped, you were abducted, someone tried to murder you, you were in a gunfight. And I would ask people, well, because I wanted to make sure that my intuition and the system resonated. And I've never had, and I've done stuff with tier 1 military, like full-time SWAT teams, military, victims of violence. I've never had anybody go through our training and said that was bullshit. That wasn't real. Because I always built it from primal gross motor physiology and psychology. It was never like, you should move like this. It's like, oh, you're going to move how you move. And what's important to you when you're 10 changes when you're 20, changes when you're 30, changes when you have kids, changes when you start your business. So when you're 22, someone cuts you off and you're like, an asshole. And now you get your kids in the back of the car and you're like, you still got that like little impulse of anger. And maybe you hit the gas for a second. Then what am I doing? Got my family in my car. Just chill out, right? You diffuse yourself. That's a self-awareness piece. Now, someone could say to you when you're 18, let me talk to you about self-awareness and self-regulation and state awareness and change it. And they're like, shut up, old man. I got this. I'm invincible, right? So why I say you hate and love, the real answer is, if I'm at a conference with you and you go, Tony Blauer is going to talk about self-awareness, and we've got a 22-year-old entrepreneur there and a 52-year-old entrepreneur, they're going to relate and absorb the information completely differently. But the reality is this: I am very comfortable with public speaking, and I've done stuff with. There's one story I always talk about where I was doing something for the Airline Pilots Association. They had flown me out, and I'm dealing with like 50 representatives from 50 states, a class of 50. They say, hey, can we extend your stay? Can you talk to the General Assembly? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I didn't even ask like who it is or what it is. And they go, like, can you talk for like 45 minutes? Yeah. Like, okay, I'll try to not talk for 5 hours, but I'll talk for 45 minutes. Then just before they go, hey, the guy before you is going a little bit long. Can you cut it down to about 20 minutes? Wow. Okay. Geez, 20 minutes. Okay, cool. And then it's like, oh, by the way, no swearing. I'm like, no, really? And they go, and Also, it's being broadcast live. CNN and Fox are here. They're doing a little clip here. So you're going to be on live TV. You'll have an earpiece. And I'm like, okay, what am I doing? Who's this? And I'm like, I haven't even looked at, there's 500 people in this General Assembly for this Airline Pilots Association thing. And it's live TV, and they cut my talk to 20 minutes. And I'm like right now, just describing it to you, my physiology is changing.
Yeah, I imagine.
Right? I got goosebumps right now. And I remember picking up my phone, calling my wife, going, holy shit, I'm fucked. She goes, what are you talking about? I go, listen, I don't even know what I'm going to talk about. I'm sweating. I'm freaking out. Thank God I'm wearing a black polo because I'm like dripping wet right now. She goes, just start talking. You'll be fine. I go, no, you don't understand. Like this time I'm going to blow it. She goes, why would you say that? How could you say that? This is what you do. I go, no, like it's 500 people. It's live TV. I can't swear. I can't warm up the audience. I'm not going to juggle and pull a rabbit out of a hat. Like I'm screwed. She goes, do you know how many times you've called me and said this? Just a couple. Just start talking. You'll be fine. So I go up and it's fine. And I call her up after, that's so amazing. I wish it was recorded. But we work ourselves up in the moment. Right. So the self-awareness piece, like now, and I'll give you an example. So that was like, that was 1993. When the pandemic happened, all my training was live, like all our force on force, all our high gear suits stopped because everyone stopped training. And within about 3 months, I realized I was going to lose my company, lose my house, lose everything. And I'm sitting here at 60 years old, and it was like somebody shoved a vacuum up my and was sucking out my insides. I was like literally in my office doing this because it was like 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And then 35 courses got canceled over the next 2 months. That was hundreds of thousands of dollars. But all our stuff is external. We didn't have any digital assets. We didn't do stuff online. And I'm looking around going, I'm going to lose everything. I gave myself 24 hours to mourn and feel bad and feel sorry for myself that I didn't prepare for the pandemic before the pandemic. I called up my team the next day. I said, the people who manage their fear manage to fight. You guys know the drill. I go, you can't solve a problem if you are the problem. You don't know that you're the problem unless you have self-awareness. Right now, I'm freaking out, although I look very stoic. Guys, we need to figure shit out. What are we going to do? We need new websites. We need digital programs. I'm going to start calling. And we always had a very cerebral program, and we have a very, we're one of the most respected groups teaching consultancies in the world. So I could call, but like within a month, I was doing like 10-hour Zoom calls with the Australian Federal Police and all their trainers, businesses. Google actually called me to do some work with some of their people. It was very funny, like, because I thought it was a joke at first. And so when I got on the phone, I said, hey, how'd you find me? Did you Google me? And then it was very funny. We hear that all the time. But what's my point about this is to tie it to your story. I'm in my garage gym right now. And I'm talking to a buddy of mine who's very, very successful in the fitness space. He's got a protein company, online training. So he's set, he's fine. And I said to him, his name's Steve Weatherford. And I go, dude, I lose everything if I don't figure something out. He goes, he says, aren't you kind of like a famous self-defense guy? I said, yeah. I said, yeah. He said, well, how many people would want to train with you online who can't? He says, I said, I got 150 people watch me work out every day on Zoom. He says, I don't charge them because they're part of my community already. He says, why don't you do that? So here's what I did. And this is the point, and maybe, hopefully this touches somebody listening to this. I had a choice between filming me going, guys, Coach Blauer here, and I got this great opportunity. Or I came on, I said, hey, guys, I need your help. I am in the fear loop right now. I am at the risk of losing everything. And I'm going to start And I explained what I was going to do. I had 100 people sign up that week because I just told the truth. And what I'm talking about is the self-awareness, knowing your audience, knowing knowing what your message is and what your method is. So I would tell people the self-awareness piece. Like when I started all this, I remember saying to my wife before the first class, and this is now, we're at class 470 in a row since the pandemic. I make more money online than I do teaching live. And I just finished a class this morning. But I've got people from all over the world that tune in to get educated and everything. But the very first class, half hour before the class, I'm walking around the house, I'm pacing. My wife says, "Are you okay?" I go, "Yeah, I'm so nervous." And she says, "How could you be nervous?" She says, "You're the best spear system instructor in the world. You love coaching. You can't catch COVID on Zoom. Why are you nervous?" And I said, two things. I started this company teaching out of garages, and I might save the company teaching out of my garage. That full circle would, again, goosebumps. And I said, and I need this to work, because if it doesn't work, we've got a very, very big problem. So I was able to my self-awareness said, "You're anxious," but instead of pretending I wasn't,
right,
I was able to, the self-awareness allowed me to peel the onion and go, what exactly am I afraid of? And that's one of the things that I teach. So when we do like fear, and I love that you guys see the connection between the psychology of fear and negotiation. You guys remember the name Iggy Pop?
Yes.
So Iggy Pop was a punk rock guy from the UK, different generation. But I share this at every business seminar. I go, Iggy Pop said, "Imagine if desperation were attractive." Imagine if desperation were attractive. So imagine you and I are about to go on a date, and I go, "Hey, I'm so glad we're going on a date. I hope it works out because I really want 3 kids and I want to live happily ever after." And you're like, "Whoa, I don't even know your last name yet." Right? This might work out, but I'm going to say no right away, right? So, because desperation is never attractive.
right,
So if you can't manage your fear, can you manage the fight? And the fight is the metaphor for my tactical presence, my facade, my energy. So if I walk in there and I go, if I'm done, if this deal, I'm going to get fired if this deal doesn't happen. I'm not going to make my quota if this deal doesn't happen. And it's really interesting the success we've had working with different people, getting them to realize that, because there are some places that you could do what I did, where I could come in and imagine if I started off, I just did a podcast recently where the guy was so nervous to talk to me because he was a lifelong martial artist and he couldn't believe I said yes to his podcast. So I said to him, I go, "Listen, man, take a deep breath and just acknowledge that you're afraid and it's making your voice quaver and you're not talking, you're thinking carefully so you don't fuck up the show, right? So don't do that. You're good. You're cool. It's okay to be nervous. There's lots of things in life you need to be nervous about, and you still need to do the thing you're nervous about. If you wait till you're not nervous, that window of opportunity is gone.
never move.
Right? So, but there's a balance, right? You got to know who your audience is, because I've gotten up on stage, or like my first class, I came in, I go, "Guys, I am a fear management expert. You all know my background, my history, right?" And they're all like, "Yeah." I go, "I'm fucking scared shitless right now. Can you tell?" And they're like, "What?" I need this but I know exactly what I'm afraid of. And it's not my skill set. It's because I'm visualizing the future and it's impacting how I'm thinking in the present. But now that I've said that, I can focus on the beginning of this speech. So there's a time when you can actually say that to your audience. "Hey guys, I cannot believe that I'm talking in front of so-and-so and so-and-so. I am so nervous right now. If I pass out," who here knows mouth to mouth, preferably, like I would rather it be from that beautiful woman over there instead of you, sir. And then now you're telling a joke, and now suddenly you realize, okay, the audience is cool. They're nervous too. I'm nervous. Let's start talking.
And I think something that you said there kind of sparked a lot of thoughts, kind of going back to my military days and applying self-awareness. And I think that it's important for the leader to help his or her people understand their self-awareness by doing realistic training, which is what you focus on, And then by providing that feedback, I always think about this medic that I had. Wasn't in Ranger Regiment, but it was after. And I'd used a lot of the skills I learned in Ranger Regiment, a lot of the realistic training. And I had this medic who just thought he was hot shit. And so he was great. You know, during the day, he'd be able to teach guys. Every time he hit the vein, was phenomenal. However, we did this night training because we're getting ready to deploy to Iraq. And this night training, it was a long movement to get to the objective. I'm the company commander, so I'm just the observer, and I'm just kind of overseeing this. And generally, as a company commander, your younger soldiers are a little nervous to be around you because they don't want to say anything stupid to get them in trouble or anything like that. And so, but I'm observing him, and I really wanted to put the pressure on him. So we had a casualty. It was like a scenario-based casualty go down. He's already sweating. He's exhausted, and he's got nods, no lights. And I make him stick him with the live needle to start pushing fluids before they move him to actually get exfilled. So basically taken away on a helicopter. And I'm just in his ear. I'm like, if you don't stick him, he is going to die. Like, just trying to make it the most uncomfortable, realistic scenario where your heart's racing. He's just fumbling with the needle now. This action that he used to do so well. And after, a few misses, he finally gets it, tapes it down, and they're able to move him out. And so it's that realistic training that he realized, okay, there are a lot of scenarios that I'm not as good as I think I am. I need to go back and work on that stuff. So I think that's kind of a lot of stuff that you talked about, and a lot of things that the scenarios that you provide just by being a coach, just by providing those realistic scenarios, just by providing that feedback, that you're helping people become self-aware, even if there's a million flavors to what that actually means for people.
For sure. There's layers, and there's times to do it. And so, what you did for him ultimately saved somebody's life downrange at a later time, because he could draw on, like, I've had this pressure before. I know what to do here. At the same time, there's the recipe for success is also the recipe for disaster if you're rushing something. And you've got to know, and this is so a really good leader can demystify fear, but knows also capacity potential. I can push this person. And I believe in their capacity potential connection, because you can push someone, of course, scar them and ruin them. And a lot of people do that. So it's a delicate thing. And this goes back to what I said earlier, that, what's important when you're 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 changes, but that's also like the bedrock of somebody's skill set, their competency. If you don't even know how to hold a gun, and I throw you into a force on force exercise, with simunitions or UTM or paintball, and freak you out, like, that might be your lifelong PTSD for a gunfight, because I didn't even teach you, weapon handling first. So there's a protocol on before you throw somebody in the deep end.
So Tony, one of the concepts that we teach in negotiation, we call it negotiation jiu-jitsu. It's a concept of when we are dealing with a very hard bargainer, somebody who's just being a jerk or using, difficult tactics, maybe even, malicious sort of activities. And we use their momentum and direction against them. The first step is don't react. We talk about stepping to the balcony, really kind of self-awareness. How am I showing up? What's my goal? What's my aim? And then the next step is, what is it that they are doing and why? How does that fit into what you teach in terms of, you've talked about self-awareness, right? How does the understanding of this other person and what they're trying to accomplish, how can we get better at maybe observing or identifying what the other person's trying to do?
The expression, the pen is mightier than the sword.
Yeah.
So I modified that back in the 80s, and I changed it to the pen is mightier than the sword when you know how to use a sword. And what that means is I'll talk, I'll negotiate, I'll even write you a letter. But if this thing blows up, I'm okay with that too. And I think that is very relevant for business and relationships. And that is, I want this to happen. Let's say a relationship. I want to fix this. And if it doesn't, I'll be fine. I'll be sad. I'll be hurt, but I'll be fine. I want this business to work. I want this deal to work. But if it doesn't, I'll be fine. And I think the ability to impose a situational awareness / self-awareness optic on the scenario needs to have at its base this idea that you'll be fine. So if I'm negotiating with you, and if you don't say yes, in my mind, my wife's going to leave me, I'm going to be fired, I can't support my kids, then suddenly we unconsciously, I'm Iggy Pop's quote, hey man, look, what do I need to make this deal happen, right? And if you say, look, this guy's being a bully because that's his school of training. Hey, here's how the deal is going to go, right? And he's just being an ass and everything. I've done deals, big deals in the past where I was so excited with the size of the company and who they were. And it was such a nightmare after, such a nightmare during, that I actually, like in some of my business talks, because one thing a lot of people don't know, I don't talk about it a lot, is in 2010, my company did $12 million domestic. I had a dozen employees. I had a 21,000 foot facility, and it was taken from me by a corrupt CEO and my former partner. They did a deal behind my back and violated every fiduciary obligation and all that. And it was just too big, and it was a nightmare, and there was so much going on. I dissolved the company. And I went from making a lot of money on Friday to like zero on Monday, and had to rebuild everything. And I say that because when the dust settled and I rebuilt everything bigger and better, I got asked through different communities, hey, would you come talk to these entrepreneurs, to these business people? And if so, what would you talk about? And I go, well, how about like a world-renowned self-defense expert who teaches self-awareness and situational awareness, how I violated everything that is fundamental to self-defense and how I lost my company by not paying attention to pre-contact cues, not having the courage to go, hey, why did you guys change the name of the holding company here? Why this doesn't make sense here? Why is this patent being put into this person's name? Oh, this is for this is for this. And I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to investigate it because I couldn't believe something was happening. And that's the denial every victim of violence who lived to tell the tale said. I knew every victim of violence, and this could be violence in business, like a hostile takeover,
right,
a relationship. Everyone knows, and every one of you, have you ever been screwed in business? Yes. Have you ever been betrayed by a friend or a loved one? Yes. Did you ever say to somebody after, I knew that was going to happen? Yes. Our intuition is undefeated, but we don't have the courage or the will or the strategic insight to listen to our intuition. This is a big part of our program. If I got a bad feeling about something now, I go, okay, I got to investigate this. I'm not going to pretend everything's okay. I want to get ahead of the danger, right? Left a bang. I want to understand stuff super early. So, this whole idea, and I'm hoping this makes sense. If, in order for you to say, I'm okay if this deal doesn't happen, that's the only way that you can, if you've got a few different negotiation styles, be that chameleon. I'm not a chameleon when I negotiate. I'm just myself. I go, hey, listen, I really want to do this. Here's the proverbial win-win, blah, 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 blah. And if you understand fear and psychology, like I've said to people who are doing the, I was talking to this one guy, and every time he gestured, he touched my arm. Have you ever had like that person?
Unfortunately, I might be that person, but go ahead.
Well, but if it's a tactic
Right.
to create rapport and somebody has good self-annoying, it's annoying. Self-awareness, it's annoying. But if you're like, oh my God, and you like, oh, this is so exciting, if it's truly emotive, it's natural. So it's got to be congruent. So, but I was in this business meeting, and this guy goes, well, here's what we do. And I'm leaning on the table like this, talking to him, and he touched my forearm. And after like the 5th time, I said, hey, I need you to stop touching my forearm. I know it's part of this, negotiation, personality, ethic, protocol. Every time you say something, but because I know that, then I know you're just trying to manipulate me. It's annoying. Just talk to me. We'll be fine. And he was like, oh, like flustered, because that's what it was, right? So, but I tell you this, it's like that Spider-Man quote that I don't remember, with great
power
comes
responsibility.
Yeah. So self-awareness is also like that can screw things up for you too.
Right.
Because most of the people who you're talking to don't have that self-awareness.
Yeah. So
it's a very delicate thing where I say, slow down, Aaron. Let's talk. Like you're talking. First of all, you're at a 10. I need you to come to a 7, and I need you to step back 6 inches. That shit's not going to work on me. And obviously, that's not a good bedside manner to say that. But just to give you an example, like if that person doesn't know that they're even doing that,
right?
Like, and we've all had arguments with people who they have no self-awareness. You can't go anywhere. So it's an interesting thing. I would say this, and I hijacked the conversation and turned it into this, is if you work for somebody and you're not an entrepreneur, like for example, my team, they'll sometimes go do a presentation, and I'll go, and I'll say to them, obviously we want this deal. Obviously I want you to hit a home run and knock it out of the park. And if I didn't think you could do it, I wouldn't send you, I'd go. So don't this up, you're fired. And they laugh, and I go, listen, this would be great for business, but if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Not a big deal. If I thought it was so risky and needed to be finessed so much, I'd be going. And you'd be shadowing or co-presenting but I know you can do this. And if they go, I can't, no. But what I'm talking about is you talk about that leadership thing of, I know that they've got fear. I had a guy doing a class online for me. His name's Dave. He's a professional stuntman. He's been in big shows, big movies, falling out of buildings on fire, falling off horses and crazy shit. He lives in Ireland. He's been a bouncer for decades. He's been in tons of street fights. He's been a lifelong martial artist, and he's on my mobile training team. So this is a first online course he's going to do. And I text him on WhatsApp. I go, Dave, how do you feel? You ready for the course? He says, Coach, I'm so nervous. I go, it's so cute that you're nervous. You've been in 500 street fights. You've competed in martial arts, and now you're afraid to do something online via Zoom. I go, why are you nervous? He goes, because I don't want to let you down. I go, good. That means you care, and I care too, and you would not be doing this if I thought you would screw it up. Just be yourself and have fun. Right? So now, if Dave didn't know it was okay to talk to me about his fear, he'd have just lied and said, I'm great, I'm ready to go. But he knew he was afraid. I knew he was. I made him talk about it, and we didn't dance around what it is. He went right away, I don't want to let you down. Just like when I started the online training, I knew exactly what I was nervous about. And that allowed me to talk about it. Elephant in the room. Guys, let's talk about this. You want this deal, I want this deal. If it doesn't happen, we're both going to be okay. We know that. So let's see if we can make it happen. And now suddenly all the games are over.
Tony, on your website, it says, learn how to face fear, understand it and control it. Learn to change your mindset, improve your communication, enhance your performance, inspire your family, friends, and peers. When you change how you look at fear, you change everything. You're a father. I'm a father. I got 6 kids.
Wow.
When do you start teaching these concepts, training these concepts, particularly around self-awareness, facing fear? When do you start working with kids on this stuff?
I thought you were going to go somewhere else.
Well, yeah, you
I
go either way.
I thought you were going to say like, so when does fear stop? Right. And I go like,
Yeah.
you know, it doesn't as a parent, you know, I don't care how old your kids are, you know, but that's an amazing question. And, I'll tell you I did not anticipate you asking me that, because I've got a handwritten letter from a 10-year-old kid. 2 years ago, you might have noticed I have 1 or 2 tattoos. My buddy Aram from Ghost Tattoo in Vegas, shameless plug for Aram. He calls me up. He says, "Hey man, my kid, who's a great kid, is starting to exhibit signs of anxiety. The masks, Vegas, masks everywhere, playing sports in masks, not seeing anyone smile. And his behavior is changing, and it's freaking me out as his dad." And he said, because we do live, of course, no fear programs, but we have a digital course for people who can't bring us in and work with us. And he says, "Is it too old for him?" And this was my answer. I said, "I don't know your son." I hadn't met him at the time. I said, "I don't know your son." The kid's name is Salem. He says, "But I know you, and the program's not too old for you. And you're his dad, and you're his coach, and you're his mentor. Not some, I don't want to get political here, but our school system is a mess. And you don't need him being influenced by there. And maybe he's got to go for some classes, but you might need to be looking into what you need to undo and course correct at home." And so he gets the No Fear program, and I'm back a month later. I go to get some more work done, and he goes, "Oh, before we start here," and he hands me a piece of paper. "When's the last time one of you guys got a handwritten letter?" I don't know. Right. I almost want to go dig it out of my office and show it to you, but it's a handwritten letter from this kid Salem, and it says, "Dear Mr. Blauer," and he goes on like one of our expressions that I make people, and I make a joke. I go, "This will be your next tattoo," but it's the line, "You can't be brave if you're not afraid." You cannot be brave if you're not afraid. The primary ingredient that fuels courage is fear. If we remove fear, there's no courage needed. If both of you have jumped out of airplanes, right? Do you guys like jumping out of airplanes, or do you not?
Awful.
Right. So listen, both of you are qualified to do it when you had to do it. And I tell this story. I love telling this story. I was down at Fort Bragg working, with the big boys, and we meet on Saturday to discuss the course during the week. And then after the meeting at a coffee shop, one of the guys says, "Hey, you want to go jumping this afternoon?" And I know what he means. And I go like this, like up and down with my fingers on the table. He goes, "Ha ha." He goes, "No, skydiving." I said, "Yeah, I know." I said, "Hold on a sec. Oh, my afternoon, I'm booked. I'm sorry." He goes, "Oh, aren't you Mr. and does air quotes, aren't you Mr. Fear Management?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm managing my fear by not jumping out of the airplane." And so he laughs, but the guy beside him laughs, the nervous laugh that you two have. This guy's an adrenaline junkie. I go, he's got like over 600 jumps. He goes whenever he can. But I knew this guy was in the same unit as him. They both are qualified to jump out of an airplane, but one guy hates it, one guy loves it. What's the difference? The guy who loves it doesn't need any courage to jump out of the airplane. The guy who doesn't like it needs fear management. That's the fuel for courage. Okay. Fuck, parachute, please open. Right? Jump out, right? And so this line, "You can't be brave if you're not afraid," is so powerful. Here's this letter from a 10-year-old kid, handwritten. "Dear Tony, thank you for the No Fear program. Thank you for the opportunity from my dad and I to work on this important program. It's so important for me to learn how to be brave, so I'm not afraid. And as I'm reading it, I'm in this tattoo parlor. I start to fucking cry. Uncool, and it's just an incongruent. I'm like, can we close the door, please? Because what I'm thinking about, I didn't have a good relationship with my dad. And I'm thinking, I remember one time in my life, I was so scared of something happened. And he said to me on the phone, seething through his teeth, don't be a wimp. And it hurt me. And because I I'd already been in fights. I'd already built my business. and I was just dealing with something that my parents hadn't prepared me for, that no guardian had prepared me for, and I was being vulnerable, and I didn't need to be kicked in the nuts at that time.
Right.
And I started crying because I was thinking about how Aaron's vulnerability to say, I'm afraid for my son, can you help? Turned into an opportunity for him and his son to talk about fear, which is going to change his son's life and change their relationship.
Wow.
As father and son, or mother, father, guardian. And that's my big mission now, is to get this program into the hands of parents, because this can't go into big tech and it can't go into schools as much as we'd like it to, because at the end of the day, the future of the world, if we look at what's going on right now, it's pretty grim. Fear has been weaponized. The only way that you can counter that is to understand fear, to understand the psychology and neuroscience of fear, to go, wait a minute, I see what you're doing with this propaganda, or I see what you're doing with this threat. And the only way you can do that is to create self-awareness. That's our superpower. Self-awareness leads to critical thinking.
Yeah.
And self-awareness and critical thinking augments situational awareness, where suddenly you go, I see that. And I see that from a distance. And now I can triangulate on that.
Thanks, Tony. That was a great answer.
So, it depends on the parent, and depends on the kid, but as soon as possible. It's ironic that you bring it up, and I'm so grateful that you did, because there's a professor named Glenn Sunshine who was a lifelong martial artist. This is the first slide in our No Fear program. It's an email that he sent me about 12 years ago. Never met this guy, never trained him, but in 1993, I released, this is how far ahead of the curve we were. In 1986, we released some videos through Panther Productions. And the first video was called Cerebral Self-Defense, The Mental Edge. It was all about de-escalation and self-awareness, that you can't diffuse someone else if you can't diffuse yourself. And then in 1993, we released an audio tape called Metacognition, The Mental Edge, and then an audio version of Cerebral Self-Defense, The Mental Edge. And this guy got these two audio tapes, and he sends me this letter, like 12 years ago. And in a nutshell, I'm paraphrasing it, he's thanking me for helping him raise his children. And he says, your insights on the psychology of fear versus the fight, flight, freeze biology, the neurobiology, which is all relevant, but it's irrelevant if you don't know what's happening. And it's irrelevant if you can't self-coach yourself through the problem.
Right.
That's the self-awareness piece and regulating state. And so he basically said, and I ended up interviewing him on our No Fear podcast. And he said, now that my kids are grown up, they're in their late 20s, 30s now, when I see them next to their peers that grew up in the same suburb as me, they are completely different in their life's accomplishments and how they handle challenges and how they handle obstacles. And the only thing different that we did as parents, with the group of parents that we all kind of knew, was the inclusion of your approach to fear management. Crazy, right?
Huge. And fear seems to hide around every corner these days. So,
well, it's everything. And if you change your relationship with fear, you change your mind. If you change your mind, you change your life.
That's great, Tony. And Tony, let me be the first to say thank you so much for joining us on the NEGOTIATEx podcast. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and I loved really digging deep into self-awareness and really understanding everything like that. I love Aram and I both love bringing on a diverse group of experts to basically be able to glean different things that we can use to help teach other people how to be more effective leaders. And so with that, thank you again. I'm going to turn it over to Aram.
Yeah, Tony, I'm going to say thanks too. This was the fastest hour and 15 minutes that we've ever done with anyone. So thank you for that. Thanks for your insights. Yeah, I'm gonna look into this program. I'll just say, because this is something I want my kids and I want myself to be able to lean in and be more effective in. And so trying to go back and try to find one thing to quote you on. I just manage fear, manage the fight. If we can show up and be more effective because we're more self-aware, I just think that's a powerful takeaway in any context, any situation any of us are going to face. So thanks again. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it, guys. This is fun, and hopefully your audience gets something out of it.
Absolutely. And people who manage their fear manage to fight. So thanks, Tony. With that, that is it for us on the NEGOTIATEx Podcast. Thanks for listening. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. You can get anything from Tony's website if you go to blauertrainingsystems.com, and it has links to all of his other websites there. And you can connect with Tony, learn more about the No Fear program. So with that, thanks. We'll see you in the next episode.
Hey, thanks for checking out this video on NEGOTIATEx TV. If you found any value at all, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification icon if you want to be notified of future videos. And then we also have a couple videos over here that you might be interested in checking out. If you and your small business, your team are looking to get negotiations or leadership training, then you can head over to NEGOTIATEx.com and learn more about the coaching services we offer. Thanks, and I'll see you over in the next video.